Welcome to Passing on Passmore podcast number 7. And I'm really pleased to be talking to Lesley. I'm going to give my audio description first. So I am a sort of olive-skinned, white, grey-haired woman with purple blue spectacles, a multicoloured white, blue, grey, pink scarf. Behind me is a green bed, and there's some yellow daffodils, a map on the wall, a dark door, and a little computer map, I think. But that's me, and I'm the creative director of Shallal. And welcome to Lesley, who's going to give us a little audio description.
Hello, Jo. Thank you very much. Yes, I am a late to middle-aged woman with white skin. I'm wearing an orange headband. I've got shoulder-length mousy brown hair. I'm also wearing a sort of burgundy type t-shirt with an orange zip-up hoodie. I'm sitting in my summer house, so you can see some windows on my right hand side, and behind me is the wall with some coats that are hanging up, I think.
Super, thank you. Yay. Although we've known each other quite a long time, and I know a little bit about what you do, I actually don't know the whole length or breadth of what you do, which is why I'm quite excited also to talk on the podcast. So could you just give us a little introduction to yourself and what inspires you, I suppose? Let's start with the what inspires you question.
Yes, okay. Thanks, Jo. Yes, well, what do I do? I think I've been trying to answer that question, and I've come to talk about it as being a community activist. So I think I do lots of different things, mainly on a voluntary basis. And the thing that inspires me, it's nature. You know, just to see the sun rise in the morning and to see the sunset is, for me, absolutely awe-inspiring. And when I first discovered something called permaculture design, which I'll talk a bit about later on, I just was like, wow, this is a system where we can be in harmonious relationship with our world, and it gives us solutions and pointers and tips. So since I was 24, I've been working in environmentalism, just trying to create a better place for the world, for the plants and for the animals and for the people, really. And I'm inspired by the awesomeness of nature, how a tree will grow and how a seed, you can plant a seed that's that small and it grows into something absolutely huge. A sunflower, for example, it's so simple, isn't it? A sunflower, and some seeds grow and some seeds don't, and that magic and that kind of, we don't know, it's not in my control. That for me is very exciting, and yeah, it's nature for me, capital letters.
Yes, yeah, how mysteriously wonderful it is, isn't it? Awesome, you say.
Yes,
absolutely awesome.
Absolutely.
Oh, brilliant. And I thought I better read up, because I've heard about permaculture and I've talked to people about permaculture. And I thought I better just have a little sort of quick look to see what the framed arc of permaculture is. And I really like the fact that the thing I read was it was earth care, people care, and fair share was one of the things I read. And I thought, isn't that beautiful? You know.
Well, yes, absolutely. You see, those are the ethics. You see, it's a design system, which is why I like it so much. It's not a dogma.
Yes.
So if people want to dig, they can dig. If it's about designing a system that works for us each, everybody. But the design is it comes from this set of ethics and this set of principles. And it's the ethics that are at our heart, which are earth care, people care, and fair share. Those 3 ethics. And that just kind of sets the ground, you know, because you can see that it's a holistic system. A lot of people hear about permaculture and think about it as a system for gardening or farming, but actually it's not land-based. It's a holistic design system. It's looking at people and the earth, and it's looking at justice, the sense of fair shares.
Yes.
And of course now, what we talk about earth repair and people repair and fair share repair, because we've gone so far now that actually to be able to care for the earth and our people, we need to do a lot of reparation in the beginning, actually, because we can't even begin to start without actually repairing the soil and repairing our people and our souls, and to look at the justice in the system, you know, around the world.
Yes.
So yes, it's great that you picked up on those three things. If anybody's going to look, the fact that you looked and that you saw those, that is the beginning. That's the heart.
That really helped me. And I know when I talk about global crisis, sometimes I'm pulled up by a lot of people that I really respect, and they say climate justice, you know, and that whole thing about the justice and reparation. And I'm so grateful that we are now looking at colonialism, because as a child I found it so difficult. And I don't think there's anything wrong. It's like a good relationship, isn't it? The first thing you do when you see someone you love and care about is say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the things that were in the past that maybe I couldn't control or were done by my ancestors, but I am sorry. And what can I do, you know, to make that sorry be real, to be valid? And then how do we go forwards, and how do we learn and listen from each other? And unless we're willing to say sorry and do that reparation, I don't think we're going to get very far. And it's not about making people feel guilty or dreadful or down, because someone called me out on it the other day and said, look, that's too heavy for children. It's not if it's done in the right way. Everything's too heavy if it's done in the wrong way, isn't it? But anyway, I won't warble on about that, but I also love that. And I love the design thing, because I also read it was design, heal, grow. I like things in threes. And I thought, yes, great, because design means you have to be specific to that place, don't you? Because what we tend to do is roll out things, and that doesn't really work. Rolling out isn't what we should be doing. It's like listening to that individual place, that particular place, and how it works, and those particular people. So yeah, very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I really was really inspiring for me when I first started to learn about permaculture design, was that it was a design system and not a dogma. Because I don't really care for dogma where it says you must do this, you must do that, because I'm like, must I? And is that right for me? And do I, you know, I might well agree with somebody saying I must do that, but I think it's much more about the individual place and the individual person.
Yes.
And we are all different, and to look at to lay out where we are and to look at what we need, I think is very different for different people. And so the thing about saying sorry and the whole reparation and climate justice, you know, we can't start to repair it unless we have a survey. Permaculture design looks at a survey. You have to really gather information and find out all the little bits that are related to the particular situation. And the whole colonialism and empire, everything, that's what we need to do. It's if you can't see what's been happening, then we can't go, oh dear, and then we can't go sorry, and then we can't, you know, and that is the way, as you say, to move forward, really. One of the principles that I love about permaculture design is well, no, actually, you can edit that bit. Bill Mollison and David Holmgreen started the concepts of permaculture design way back in the 70s, and he said that the greatest skill of a permaculture designer is that of observation. He said if we lost our schools and universities, it wouldn't be any big deal, but if we lost our wilderness and our nature, that would be huge. So they talk about learning from nature, nature being our teacher. And so we look at the way that a tree grows or the way that a river flows, and the river will go to the path of least resistance. You know, the tree has very grounded, sturdy roots, and it provides shade and shelter. So actually, I see nature as being my teacher. And that sense of observation, the sense of really looking carefully and closely at the situation. And within the permaculture design system, survey is the first thing that we do. And then we go back and we go, oh, we could do this, 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 and this. And then we go back to the survey again, you know, and we go, is all of that excitement and enthusiasm, does that fit with what we've seen? Does that fit with our nature and with the nature of the land base that we're working with? So yes, I think it fits with the, you know, with the apologies, that sense of really looking, and the whole sense of I've lost the thread of what you were saying, was design. That was it. Design. It was about it being a design system.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think freedom is really important, isn't it? That I picked up on you saying, when people say we must do something, we don't get the best out of people, do we? And it sounds so wonderful, because it's all about that collaboration and respect and listening to everybody and looking at everything and looking really sort of peaceful looking, isn't it? I'm very intrigued about that. I'll talk about that another day somewhere. But that thing of observation and looking is so important. And it's also reminds me of the donut economics. And I think one of the notes I made when I was thinking about it was really what we're talking about here, because I quite often think about systems change, but it's about a design revolution, isn't it? Because I was on a sustainability sort of workshop, and she was saying you need to put it in at the design phase. It's no good coming along and going, oh, we've got this wonderful thing. Oh, how do we make it work? How do we do a circular economy? How do we stop waste? It's like you have to design in that, you know, circular economy, limited waste, good ethics, you know. And I think that's what's exciting, isn't it? Those conversations about how do we design it. And I think a lot of people are more responsive. Sorry, I'm waffling on a lot and I want to talk to you, but a lot of people are more responsive if you do it at the design phase, because you're asking them for their intelligence and input, rather than coming along as a critique or a problem later on that has to be solved. Yes,
absolutely, because they become part of that process. You see, if you give people the opportunity to say, why don't you have a look at your situation and what do you think? How do you think you can best sort it out? So within permaculture design, I always when I start off, I always talk about the permaculture activist, which is we've got these 3 ethics at our heart, which is earth care, people care, and fair shares. And then we've got these principles, these attitudes that are coming out of our head, which is ways of thinking. It's a different way of thinking, permaculture design, for me. And then we've got all these principles which come out of our sort of like our hands and our feet. They're kind of like the doing. And if we've got a combination of these 3 things, they inform the design.
yes.
So it's very much coming from these ethics, first of all, and then these attitudes. And one of the attitudes, I love the attitudes. The attitudes is 5. They used to call them 5 mollies, as Bill Mollison. One is work with nature, not against. So we have this sense of an idea of like weeding out everything, and nature actually is naturally will always cover soil, because we learn from nature, because we find out that then soil doesn't erode, soil doesn't dry out, it gets protection from the sun. So that is the natural way to have the soil covered. So when we're gardening and we're sort of like pulling out all of these weeds to try and sort of like keep a nice neat view on everything, we're using a lot of energy, really, that we don't necessarily need to use, because actually it's okay for some of those weeds to be there and help us out. And everything gardens, that's another attitude, which is to look at how nature will, for example, the forest doesn't have a gardener. You know, the tropical rainforest doesn't have a gardener. The trees drop their leaves, they create a mulch on the ground, small shoots come up. They provide nutrients for medium-sized plants that then provide shelter and shade for bigger-sized plants. So chickens will scratch and sort of get everything, makes their environment to their best possible thing. And so if we can observe that and notice that, then we can kind of like replicate that for systems for ourselves and for our own personal sense as well. Everything gardens and working with nature. What's my nature? You know, am I tired? Yeah, let's just have a rest, shall I? You know, let's just do some radical resting. My friend calls it radical to resting nowadays, because we
does.
we think that we've you know, so often I see people and I'm going, you know, how are you? You know, what did you? Oh, I didn't do anything today. Oh, I didn't do anything. I just sat and watched the television. I just sat and read a book. I was like, you did. You rested. You recovered. You radical rest. I said that is a radical act in today's act, and I really would love to see people just appreciate how doing nothing is actually a very important thing that we are doing. I've sort of waffled on a bit, but it's that sense of it's a sense of those attitudes and those ethics, and then those principles that inform the design system, and then people are part of it. Then you're not saying to people, oh yes, there's this thing called donut economics, we should do that, but people are then going, we could do this circular thingy. You can go, that's called donut economics, or you know, you can find out about that from somewhere else. Absolutely.
And people-led and learning by doing, and then you think it through, don't you? Or then you sort of put in that sort of fine-tuning and go like, okay, well, if we're working in this way, that's good, it works. So what more can we learn about working in that way? I was very interested. I went and had a walk around a managed coppiced woodland the other day, and they were using what nature does, but using it, you know, so clearing land and different levels of sort of undergrowth and trees. And it was fascinating, really fascinating and really helpful, actually. Anyway, so inspired by nature, what would you do now? So the question is it's based around Passmore was wanting to be useful. We started off saying, if you're a philanthropist and had lots of money, what would you do now? But it could be just, what would you want inspired now? I think what I wanted, but I think you're such an activist, you're doing a lot of it anyway. It's like, but if you could just go, let's make this happen, and there were no barriers to it. This is what you felt we needed to do now, and it could sort of happen. Like my brother talked about no-take zones, and he also talked about localism. But what would you do, or what do you see? Does that make sense as a question? It's a bit
absolutely. I mean, there's so much that needs to be done, doesn't there? But I think if one thing that I'm inspired by that I think is just amazing is the concept of community orchards. So for me, to be able to have a few apple trees, it can be very simple, you see. We can look at the social housing situation, which often do have a little green space, a playing space, or even sort of space outside people's houses. I was up at Trenier the other day in Penzance, and there's ever such a lot of green space, grass, you know, green grass. And if we had an apple tree or two planted there, and I think it would be important to have some funding for somebody to start it off, to engage with the community, because we can't expect people to suddenly go, oh, what do I do with an apple tree? So I think that would be where the funding and the resources would need to be put in, really. Then we would have apples, and we would have free apples for free that would be falling off the tree. We'd be able to grow. So the concept of planting an apple tree, and for people to be able to be in contact and in touch with that tree, to be once a year, apples start to fall into the ground, and then we can make fruit juice. And we don't have to buy our apples from the supermarket, which are wrapped in plastic very often, and very often come from thousands and thousands of miles away. It's kind of like a very simple act, because one of the permaculture design's features as well is about things being permanent, not having to do things every single year, putting new plants in. And fruit trees are permanent. It's just once they're there, they're there. And they do need, a bit of management sometimes. But if they don't, they'll still be there. If they don't get pruned efficiently every year, they will still be there, and the apples will still be falling. And I think the sense of transformation that I've seen from people, there's a beautiful orchard in St Ives and there's a beautiful orchard in Newquay, community orchards, which are for the people, by the people, on land actually which has been entrusted. And it gives rise to so many other things. So many other things start flowing out and following out from that, and people start to begin to get engaged. So I would just, oh my gosh, I would just love to see every town and parish have a community orchard designated. And we don't, and you see, we can start with an apple tree, but it doesn't really stop there, because then people start going, oh, can we have some blueberries and some blackcurrants and some raspberries? And like, well, yes, of course, because that's all part of the whole system with all the different layers that we have in a forest garden system. So, but it starts with that apple tree. That's something that's very recognizable. That's something that everybody can, and even if people don't like eating apples, to have juice all year round. We've got apple juice all year round from our trees. And it's such a beneficial, functional, fabulous thing to do.
And it's so beautiful, isn't it? The blossom, the whole thing about it. And they're never too big. So no one's going to go, oh, it's too big, it's going to fall on my house, or, all that sort of stuff. It's manageable, isn't it? I used to drive past an area outside Falmouth where I live and go like, I wish I could buy just those fields, because there's a lot of sort of housing development. And then there's some farmland. And that the town's going to extend, is you say, if you could just buy that land so that people that lived in those houses, that had little gardens, but not a lot of space, had somewhere where they could take their children for picnics, had somewhere where they could walk around that was big enough, but also productive, and like you say, where lots of things come from. No, I really, that's beautiful. Beautiful.
We have the orchard in St Ives. They have days where people can go and help, and help clear the grass, to sort of mulch the trees. When they're young, the trees need more care, and we need more mulching. But it becomes a community event. It becomes a friendly event. It becomes a place where people can sit and chat and sort of like while away the hours, and sort of like have a cup of tea, have a glass of apple juice, do some work. Kids can run around. It doesn't matter that, it gets them out of the house. It's less maintenance really to look after a child that's sort of like out in nature and within sort of like the holding of a community event. And then you can also have particular days, sort of like a day where everybody comes and presses the apples together, and a day where we can celebrate the spring or the autumn, or the particular seasons. As you say, it really brings it into people's consciousness. And for me, I think, like I said, I'm completely inspired by nature, and I think that's kind of our teacher. And so I do see how people are affected when they get the opportunity to be with nature and to see, I've seen people who don't really like apples that much go, oh, hang on a minute, to take an apple from a tree and just go, oh my gosh, and they taste so different. We've got a very limited variety that is available to us from the supermarkets, and once we come into sort of like growing, we've got some Cornish varieties here that we're growing, and we can put sort of like 5 or 6 different apples on the table, and they can all taste different. And for me, that is such a joy. People go, oh, I didn't know that apples were so diverse. And so, and then we start getting people engaged, and they start going, wow, this is amazing. And then it flows. So I think if it's like that little seed, isn't it? I think a community orchard sort of like very much acts as that little seed. But we need to have people it's a bit like Local Agenda 21, when we had somebody who was in areas to kind of like further the idea of sustainability. I'm not so keen on that word, but really to sort of like create resilience and to sort of for community engagement. And I think we would, so it would be kind of like, you know, it'd be like 10 apple trees and a person.
Yes, yes, I agree. Yeah.
Every town and parish throughout the land, with this, you know, this lovely sort of program, sort of like lovely advertising of sort of like being beneficial and being exciting and being harmonious and wholesome. And, you know, I mean, we could tick lots of boxes as well if we needed to from the political agenda about sort of like, you know, less plastic and less carbon and all sorts of things like that. But for me, it's about the heart of this kind of like the heart of living somewhere and finding out that, you know, we can grow some of our own food.
Yes.
And just watching that travel on, really.
Oh no, wonderful. Oh no, I'm very excited. I remember an old man being interviewed, and someone said, "What's your favorite food?" And he went, "Apple pie." He said, because they would eat it at every, you know, all year round, or not all year round, but a lot of the year, because apples, you know, ripen at different times, don't they? And like you say, they taste different. So although it was apple pie, it was apple pie that tasted different because of the different apples.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Our neighbours actually have apples all the year through.
Yes, and you can store them, can't you, as well?
They store them. Yeah, they've built a store now, which is an underground store, and yeah, we've managed to actually make it so that we've got apples all the year through, fresh apple all the year through.
Isn't that wonderful? That is fantastic. Oh, okay. So I didn't know whether I wanted to ask you, because you've been so sort of you've done so much for the CEE bill going through. It's now got a new name, isn't it? Climate.
Yeah, they dropped the emergency, so it's called the Climate and Ecology Bill now.
Climate and Ecology Bill. Yes.
Yes.
Is it worth saying a little bit about that, because that's pretty vital, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, that's sort of, it's really important. So literally yesterday we just heard that Cornwall Council agreed to pass a motion to support the Climate and Ecology Bill. It's a private members bill, so it's a bit unlike an ordinary Act of Parliament, and so its journey through Parliament is sort of not as simple, really. And it will be in Parliament, and then it will drop out of Parliament, and the details are kind of a bit beyond me. But it's the only bit of legislation really that deals with the climate and deals with nature at the same time.
Yes.
You've got legislation that's looking at emissions and carbon emissions and targets, and we've got other bills that are looking at the ecology, but this one brings them both together. It's got really clear targets so that the government, whichever party is in power, has to stick to. So it's quite different from the pledges that are made at the Paris Agreement, etc., which we are falling short of reaching in our targets. This bill, if it becomes law, will actually hold the government to account. It's actually got targets, legislative targets. So it's a really important private members bill, and we've been working since it was introduced in September 2020 to raise people's awareness about it and get support from MPs. And we were really successful. Derek Thomas, our MP here in St Ives, came out to support the bill just a couple of months ago, which is just fantastic. He was the third member of the Conservative Party to support the bill, and now we've just heard that Cornwall Council are supporting the bill as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And it's not about what party you're in. You know, there's a lot at Westminster with the private members bill, and there's a lot of political this, that, and the other. But actually, we know that the climate and the effect of the climate and the effect of the nature depletion affects every person, whatever political party we support or don't support. And so this really is a cross-party initiative, and it really needs to be cross-party. And I think Cornwall Council sort of got that yesterday.
Yes, that's brilliant. I saw that it was coming up for them, and I was just really hopeful. And then when I heard, that's really
yeah, we were just delighted, absolutely delighted. We were sort of like, we held up we started the CE Bill Alliance West Cornwall, because there's the national campaign 0 Hour, and we thought, yeah, we can kind of like align with that sort of down here in West Cornwall. So I feel like we've, along with many other people, it's been a very collaborative effort, which again is another sense of permaculture design. It's not, we draw in, it's about, one of the principles is beneficial functional relationships. It's looking all the time to make beneficial functional relationships. And if a relationship isn't beneficial or functional, then we talk about design by the removal of limited things. And so that would be like, why would I need to be here in this relationship with this piece of earth or this person if it's not beneficial and functional? So the whole campaign down here in West Cornwall has been very collaborative, and we've really tried to make relationships with people, to talk to people exactly about what's been going on and how important this bill is, rather than just kind of like doing a cold email or just trying to so yes. And in that there's yet another yield, because it might be that, we started it off thinking perhaps our MP won't ever back this bill, but actually one of the important things is that we're having conversations with people about the importance of it, about the climate and about our nature and the importance of the ecosystems down here. So, permaculture design is so multifaceted. It's holistic. It's the whole thing, really, which is just excites me so much.
Well, it's lovely, isn't it? And it's part of it. It's so important, the journey, isn't it, as well as the destination. It's like, because there are so many. I often think, like with creativity, you start with a vague idea, but you might get something so much richer and so much more wonderful by the time you've had the conversations and you've talked to other artists and you've done other things. Something quite different and maybe much better than your original idea comes out.
Yeah, very often that's the case, isn't it? Very often we think we've got this destination, and then there's all of these different sort of like turnings and turning points on the way. And I think it's really important again to notice those, that sense of observation, to go,
and if something better comes,
I'm in
to
a
actually
little,
follow it.
Yes, I'm in an eddy now. Oh, I'm in a little whirlpool, and I'm out of the mainstream, and for me personally, I spent a lot of my earlier years just really cutting off those whirlpools, because I was thinking that I needed to get to that end point. I needed to be on that main flow. But those whirlpools, those are the magic of the place of the creation, and the sort of like, the chaos and the sort of newness, really. And they are part of that main flow. So it's not as if before I'd be thinking, oh, I can't do that because I've got to do that. But it's connected. It's connected, all to do with that main flow. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it's a sort of sense of gifts that come along, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I always say, like, the other thing I say is, anything else you'd like to add, or you'd want to sort of say, because sometimes when one starts talking, one goes like,
well, I think Well, I just think as well as that sense of, like I said, there's so much that could be done, that I feel needs to be done. And you've heard me talk about how passionate I am about permaculture design. So I think I'd have it on the national curriculum.
Oh, what a good idea.
Sort of like have some kind of, I don't know, like wave a magic wand. I'd be saying, it's on the national curriculum in the way that maths, with the importance that maths and English have. I'm very upset that the arts, you get to a certain age at school and you have to decide between all these different subjects, but you never have to decide to do maths or English, because it's always there and it's deemed to be essential. Whereas dance or fine art or something is an option. You have to choose between them, photography or dance or art, So I'd have permaculture design there as an essential subject from the time that we start school.
Yes, and it's I always find it so strange that there are all these wonderful things we do with little children, and then suddenly you become sensible or something. You don't no longer do them. Everybody plants seeds with little children, shows them how beans sprout, has a bit of gardening and a bit of soil. And it's just an extension of that, isn't it?
Yeah. And wouldn't it be lovely if that application of when we're looking at how the bean sprouts, if we go, and how does that relate to us as people? The people care and the earth care and the fair share. It's like, and how does that relate to people across the world? Are they planting seeds? What about all of the colonialism and how we've taken, it's a whole thing. It's very very narrow, plant a seed, you go, oh, hooray.
Yes.
But the thing about permaculture design is looking at the whole system. So if we might not have to change what we do at school that much, but if we had that application to it, we could look at that seed and how do we grow as individuals, and where's the best soil for me to thrive, and where's my shade, where do I need my shade and my rest, and where do I get my water and my nourishment from, and that sort of thing. So yes, absolutely.
I think so. That whole sort of idea of ecosystems, isn't it, and flourishing within ourselves as well as within as nature and culture. Yes.
And I think people think that if we go back to gardening and go back to the allotments and all this idea about sustainability, it's all about going backwards, and it'll all be a bit hard, and it'll be a bit dour, and it'll all be a bit, but actually I find it so inspiring and nourishing. It's not easy to necessarily spend the afternoon working in a garden, or to go to a meeting where I find myself being quite challenged. It might be taking myself to my edge. But both of those situations, I just come out feeling inspired, because I feel I've grown. I feel I've done something important. And I find that's quite different from other situations where I'm just sort of like being given stuff and sort of like in receipt of stuff. And I sometimes come out feeling quite bland, really. So I think permaculture design is very much about solutions focused, and all the things that can come from that, and reap the benefit from that. So yeah, I think we don't have to go into thinking it's going to be terribly hard and terribly backward.
Yes,
I think
I've definitely said that to. I was talking to someone who's a very good craftsman once, and he said, "I don't want to be a Luddite. I don't want to go backwards." And it's like, no, but it's so. I think it's quite important to sometimes take that out, isn't it, and say it's forward thinking, and you can bring all the best of science and all the best, of modern thinking with you, but it's that thing of we're of the earth, and we eat food from the earth, and we need to look after the earth. It doesn't come out of nowhere, and so I think that connection is really important, isn't it? Yeah.
And we are the earth, we are nature protecting ourselves. It's like I don't consider myself an environmentalist going out and doing it for nature and protecting nature. I am nature.
Yes.
We are all a part of nature, and so all of the work that I do is benefiting myself as well. It's for me to be in harmony with everything. And I think that is one of the biggest things that's happened over the last few hundred years, thousands maybe, is that a lot of people have disconnected themselves with nature, and it feels like there's the humans, and then there's the nature.
Yes, and you don't see an ecosystem, do you, with a person in it usually, when it's talking about, the life cycles or the predators and everything. I mean, I think if we stuck human beings in as predators, we would just be terrified sometimes, what we've done. Maybe that's why we don't put ourselves in it, but it is interesting. And I think that I definitely have noticed in the last couple of years that dialogue is changing. that we
Yes.
are now including ourselves in that whole sort of cycle, which is,
Yeah.
say, has to happen, doesn't it? Because I never could understand it, and I still find it really distressing. You know, our rubbish goes somewhere. It doesn't magically disappear. All our plastic, all our waste goes somewhere. It might not go in my back garden, but it goes in somebody else's, or it goes in some beautiful area of landscape. And it's like that disconnect that I can sort of, that it's not part of me and it's not part of my problem and solution, which is quite challenging, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. When they say I'll throw it away, well, there isn't any away.
No, away is not, I know.
My away is somebody else's backyard,
Yes.
somebody else's landfill, someone else's, place of pollution. All blew my mind when I first did the permaculture course, because I remember somebody saying, all waste is pollution. I was like, what rubbish, what I throw away. Everything that goes out of my system, whether or not it's the poo and the pee, or the plastic bag that the bread came in, or the weeds that I throw away, it's all pollution. And so I'm like, so everything that goes. So then that sense of trying to really have a circular thing and think about things not going away from my land,
reused, and just...
to really working and seeing, okay, so if I don't take it out of my house or my garden, how can I bring it in and keep it in the system rather than throwing it away?
Yes.
There is no away, as you said.
I know. It's like, my children know that, if you really want to make me depressed, take me up to the dump to throw some things into I know people do rescue things from the skips, and it's not all about just total waste, but it's not one of my favorite places, I must say. Except I got a chair the other day.
Yeah, it's extraordinary what people throw away, isn't it, at the recycling centre? Absolutely. And so much of that goes into landfill.
Sorry,
yes, but times are changing, as you said. There is a more understanding that we are a part of nature, and that's what I was going to say, the humble earthworm.
I think glorious.
I try to remember to say thank you before I eat my meal, and one thing that I really love doing is eating together. So every Sunday, I eat with my neighbours. We all eat together. There's about 10 of us, and we just bring a dish. So it's not like one person has to cook for 10 people. Each household would just bring a dish, and we just say thank you for the food. And it doesn't need to be a religious thing or a specific prayer, but we say thank you for this food. And I always thank the earthworm.
Lovely.
Because if we didn't have the earthworm, we wouldn't have any food. And that just blows my mind. I just think the worms are there creating soil, keeping our soils healthy, and feeding the birds and the whole system. But the earthworm, I'm just like, oh my gosh, that worm, the worms. Thank you for the worms. Thank you for the worms. And I think people don't understand. People don't understand that earthworm is connected. That is a beneficial functional relationship. That earthworm is connected to me. Yes. All of those earthworms are connected to that food which is on my plate.
I love, I always used to say to people that what I loved in work, I felt that work was symbiotic. It's like when something's good, it benefits everybody. It benefits everyone involved. And,
yes.
And it doesn't have to be, I think sometimes it has to be an equal exchange. It doesn't have to be an equal exchange at all. It just is an exchange. And in all of it. No, it's wonderful, isn't it? And all the sort of, I've been following what's it called now? A soil web program or something.
Yeah.
So, soil food web school.
Food web, yeah,
Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm learning so much. All the little creatures, it's just fantastic.
In a teaspoon, absolute, in a teaspoon, billions, more than in the stars in the universe or something they said. It's just like mind-blowing, the complexity of our soil. And it's heartbreaking, actually. It's heartbreaking how they've been so degraded over the years through modern agricultural techniques, and I feel really sad for farmers and the farming community, because I think it's really difficult.
It's really hard place.
It's a really hard place to be in now, to know. Yeah, there's this fabulous chap up in North Cornwall, Chris Woods, with his beavers that he's introduced. Do you know about him?
I've heard of them, yes.
Yeah. Well, he's like, and there's this extraordinary, fabulous film called Food for Thought. Which features our Lisa Guy down here and another farmer up in, I think it's in East Cornwall, I forget his name, but their farms are amazing. They're really looking. So Lisa, she uses everything on her farm to feed her cows.
Brilliant.
She doesn't buy in anything at all, and you look from that aerial view of her farm and it's just planted up with trees. It's a whole mosaic. It's very different from these kind of like plowed, empty, bare squares of field. It's this kind of weaving, extraordinary sort of like situation where she's got summer yield. She's got so much more than just the cows. She's got all the bees and all the wildlife and the trees and the willow and food to feed the cows from. And, it's a whole system which works just beautifully. So there is more understanding about the value of soil, about the ways that we can farm and still produce food, which doesn't need to be so intensive and so destructive. But that's what, when you're talking about earth care, that soil understanding is earth repair. We really need to repair.
Yeah, really huge. And yes, I could go on about things, but yes, I agree.
It's so exciting, isn't it? The soil web is so excited. And then if we look at that from a human perspective and start looking at our butt biome.
Yes.
Our butt biome.
Good one. I wasn't going to get into it. Was it? I've lost my words. Toilets. What do we call them? Oh, compost loos. I thought I'll leave the compost loos to about biomes.
Well, somebody at the film showing that I was at, Chris, when they were talking about the pollution of the water and how our southwest water is sort of like, there's a lot that they could be doing. And then, and he looked at the audience and he said, we're all responsible for this. He said, we could all just get a bucket and poo in a bucket. That's what I'd be doing. Yes. Understanding the nature of it. It's that waste. There is no way.
Yes.
So when we use a conventional toilet, everything goes somewhere. We flush it away, but it goes to a big chemical treatment plant, and then we drink it. It's fed back into our drinking water.
I think it's very beholden. So I'm in London at the moment. I think it's very beholden, for people who can do things like that, because we live in a fairly sort of green environment, and it's possible in Cornwall for a lot of us to do it, because if you're in a high-rise flat, that's really not going to be something you can go to easily or do easily, so it's like it's that sort of local focus, isn't it, of doing what you can in your area for your area.
Yeah, and again, it's about design, isn't it? It's noticing what you can do and what's not possible, and then perhaps supporting other people that are doing that. There's bound to be places in London that are growing food that are sort of like really looking at that circular economy, and we might not be able to do it. I had this dream that I wanted chickens for years. I'm going to live in the country and I'm going to have chickens, and I had the opportunity to live in the country and look after somebody's chickens. I was like, I don't want to do chickens. I haven't got the time, I haven't got the capacity. Oh my gosh, they take such a, you need to do things twice a day. You need to care for them. You need to make sure the fox isn't going to be there. You've got to get the food. Oh my gosh. So now I just get my eggs from people that do chickens rather than the supermarket, so I can support them and they need my support.
Yes.
And so it sort of works. But
it's that thing of not having to be everything, isn't it? You can do do your part that you do well, and
yes,
that whole sort of that's that communal thing, isn't it? I think that's also where things have gone wrong sometimes. Is people feel like they have to be this independent unit and do everything, and I think that can scare people away, rather than saying, actually, we're going to have these really nice, symbiotic, helpful relationships, and you do that and I'll do this, and I can ask your help and you can ask my help. And yes, I think that's that's the community we need to we have got it, but we just need to keep building it, I think.
Yes, I think it's there in niches, isn't it? It's there in clubs and societies, and I think they tend to get a bit insular, but we need to start making partnerships and relationships. Again, that's what a design system is about. That's what that connection with nature is about. It's what the connection with the soil is about. What's our relationship with the soil? And if we eat food that's grown in healthy soil, then we get way more nourishment that then helps our gut biome, not our butt biome.
And we'll have a whole other podcast one day about compost loops.
So yeah, it's all about that thing of real beneficial relationships and connecting. It's reconnecting and noticing our connections with each other, with nature, and all of those connections that we can make, those beneficial connections. Yeah, it's been great.
Oh, it's so nice. It's so nice to have uninterrupted conversations. Thanks so much.
Absolutely, Jo. Absolutely.
Darling, I think we're there then, aren't we?
As you know, we could both go on and on.
I know, you've got things. I need to get on. Have a really good day.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for asking me. Thank you.